Hey guys, welcome. Glad you could join us. First off, I want to say a big thanks to Classy Packs for helping me put this together. He did an incredible amount of the work way in advance, and then threw a bunch extra, thank you for the follow, in this afternoon, last minute, because I like to procrastinate. So, today we're going to be covering the DCS A10C, and we're going to specifically cover the multifunction color displays, which are the two big TV-looking monitors on the front of the dash. And we're also going to cover some of what Classy has dubbed the TI-85, the CDU over here on the side. I am by no means an absolute expert on this. Just wanted to throw that out in advance. I'm just going to be sharing some that I've picked up along the way, and we may even wind up looking up some of these answers together depending on whether or not I know an answer to a question. So let's go ahead and get started. You can find the server information on the bottom of the screen there. And there are 12 slots available. I believe Primus and I are occupying 2, so there's 10 left. Otherwise, if you want to follow along in your own stream, you could set up an instant action mission and just configure it with some basic weapons, just one of each type, generally speaking, and reduce your fuel so the aircraft will actually perform. And once you've got that done, then you can just kind of listen in or watch the stream on the side, whatever you have available. All that out of the way, first step for the A10 is to set the power. So you come over here on the right side, you activate your battery power. You also turn on your inverter. Battery power is a DC current. The inverter switches that to AC, and some of these instruments in the cockpit require AC, and some require DC. So that's why it has both types, and you have to turn the inverter on. While I'm here, as far as my sweep goes, I generally grab the oxygen just because it's close. And if you have a Thrustmaster Warthog, you'll notice that these buttons, starting on engine fuel flow norm and going all the way back to these, which are underneath, are all modeled on the joystick that you have physically sitting next to you. So I usually, when I start the match, pump my throttles forward and then back and lift them over the detent. Moving it forward and back just makes sure that the throttles have been picked up by the game, and then lifting them over the detent matches what the position is with what's in the game. So if I lift my left throttle now and move it forward, it lifts over the detent, and then the throttle moves. I lift it and pull it back, and it returns to idle cutoff. So with my left hand, after hitting battery power, inverter, oxygen, I reach over here and switch my APU switch to start. You'll see your APU starting because the temp is going to spike up by 700 where the red mark is, and your APU RPM, measured in percentage, is going to climb. You'll notice that the temps fall and that the RPM percentages hang right here at about 90%. Then it catches again and jumps back to 100. When it's jumped to 100 and your temps have spiked and fallen for the second time, the APU is started. Now before that, you can turn that APU power switch on, but you're going to get a master caution warning, which will appear right here on the dash. You can turn it off by clicking that. Nothing's really the matter, it's just letting you know, hey, I can't produce any power with this APU generator yet. And thank you, Oz, let me adjust that. Okay, got it back now. Alrighty, so my APU is started. It's turning the correct speed. I have now turned on the APU generator power switch, which basically the generator is always hooked to the APU, but turning that on allows it to generate electricity and to put a load on that. Basically, it's a really simple, tiny jet engine. It's mounted in the fuselage between those two jet engines. If I get this exterior view here, you can see the APU exhaust just under the port engine. There's a little black port there, and you can even see some of the exhaust has put carbon on there in the model that they have generated here. So pretty cool stuff. All right, so once the APU generator is producing power, it is producing a significant enough amount of power that you can turn on your EGI and your CDU. Your CDU power is what's going to enable the TI-85 to power up. Once that starts, it's going to run through its bit test. Bit just meaning built-in test, which makes me laugh that it would say bit test when T is test. Whatever. It's going to start running that. EGI, or EGI, is embedded, excuse me, I'm going to Google that real quick before I use the wrong one, but essentially it's talking about your GPS and your INS. GPS, obviously, uses the GNSS, which is the Global Navigational Satellite System. It's a series of at least 24 satellites that orbit the Earth in a generally north to south pattern. They're separated out, and they all run atomic clocks. So GPS works by all of these satellites signaling pulses down at the same time based on when those atomic clocks inside tell them to. And the time that the pulses arrive to your aircraft, and the aircraft knowing which satellite sent that pulse, is what allows it to calculate, based on the speed of light, your distance from the satellite. When it can translate, or when it can triangulate from enough satellites, then you have a reliable GPS signal. The inertial system operates off a series of electronic or mechanical gyros, depending on the system. I don't know which the A10 integrates. But basically, whenever you move the jet, a gyroscope attempts to stay in the place that it previously was while spinning. And it's that same force that allows motorcycles to balance and allows a lot of your instruments to function. So anytime something disturbs the jet, the gyro inside the jet tries to stay in place, and it perceives the motion between itself and that gyro and then determines what the jet is doing around you. It combines that with the air data computer, which takes information on atmospheric temperature and pressure and calibrates all of that all together with the GPS, and that's how you get reliable navigation data through the EGI, or EGI, or EGI, however you want to say it. And Google's not helping me on what this is called, so I'm going to go over here, type Control F. It's the embedded GPS INS, so I think I was going to say it right earlier, but I didn't want to say it wrong because I'm trying to teach, and if I'm teaching wrong, that's not going to help. Admiral, it's so you don't have to look at the rest of my apartment this whole time. All right, let's get the sound down a little bit. I'm going to close the canopy. That's a right click and hold function if you've never flown before. Once the canopy's down and locked and the light has gone out, you can release it. Acronymception indeed, yes. Welcome to aviation, the government, and then the culmination of that, military aviation, which is government aviation. Everything is an acronym, and acronyms have acronyms. And it's painful to try and remember it. Yeah, I figured if I did that though, that I'm so pasty and then tried to black it out like a green screen that I would vanish. So, yeah. We just get inflatable bed. All right, so recapping, we've turned on our battery power, we've turned on our inverter. We've come over to the left side and turned on our APU. We waited until both of these gauges indicated roughly what they're showing now, which is 100% speed, or close to, and 400 degrees exhaust gas temperature. Yeah, sorry for no A10 slots, Hogs, but since we are dealing with the clickable cockpit version, learning specifically today, so the MFD and the CDU, I decided that the A10A wouldn't be much help. You can still learn some of the concepts for navigation, but it's going to be painful to try and translate stuff from a non-clickable cockpit or from the clickable cockpit to the non-clickable cockpit in terms of what's doing what. So, sorry for no A10As. Today's A10C day. All right, so once those both started, we turned on our APU generator power, and once we had power, we turned on our EGI and our CDU. Those two switches behind the keyboard. Moving to the left side by your left knee, the next switch I go for is the CICU, which is, I'm going to have to look up the acronym, and an IFCC to test. The IFFCC, excuse me, is your HUD. So that sends power to the module behind this portion of the dash, which runs off a reflector and through this lens, and then projects it to reflect off of this glass, which is covered in a special coating. And that's why you can see things bouncing off that glass. And that's why when you lean around, those indications disappear. You're actually looking at a focused reflection from down in the dash. All right, so if you ever suspect that you're in a server where random failures are enabled, you're going to want to run all your bit tests because the aircraft might start with a failed component. So you're going to go ahead and click Enter on the upfront controller. This little box on top of the dash here is the upfront controller. A lot of these buttons and functions you will see mirrored elsewhere. For example, System, Navigation, Waypoint, Offset, all of the rest of these, the Mark Point button, Steer, Position, Waypoint, you'll find all this information down here. They integrated this so that information could be put in by the pilot without having to take his eyes all the way down to his right hip.
Pull up, pull up.
And it's going to run through its GCAS, and you're going to get the indications here.
Altitude.
And then once it's done, it's going to finalize the test and say, hey, we're good. Then you have an exit cursor. Click Enter again, it exits, and then lists all the rest of the bit tests. You could optionally run the pre-flight bit test. I generally elect not to. If something's going to fail in flight electronic-wise, generally the best bet is just to go home. I don't know of any specific servers that run failures, Admiral. You can use the selector button right over here. You can rock up and down and select exit. Another press of the enter key will get you there. Now you've got the bit menu under the main menu. I don't know why version 3 is here, but apparently that is the version that's modeled in the game. CCIP consent option off. I leave that off. I don't want to have to deal with the consent stuff later. I just want to be able to hit the pickle button on my joystick and have the bomb fall off the rack. Hogs asks, what's the procedure for getting a failure? If you suspect you have a failure, you can try and cross-reference with other instruments. And if for some reason you can't determine it, but something's not behaving right, and you're actually trying to survive the mission, you go home and request repair. That's the simple way of doing it. There are several other methods. You could probably find some actual A10 emergency checklist procedures online. I don't have any in particular. I believe that there is an emergency procedures checklist in the manual. Yes, page 579 of the DCS A10C flight manual has emergency procedures. I don't know how in-depth it is, I don't know how good it is, but you could take that information and generate yourself a checklist for different things that could happen. Recognizing the failure is usually the biggest problem, and then the second is if it happens in combat as a result of taking fire, you generally don't have a lot of time to react in the A10 because you're low, and relatively speaking, you're slow. So it's a matter of fly the plane first, and then if you can get far enough away without getting shot, then you deal with what's going on later. As far as correcting things in flight, there's generally not a lot to be done. As long as you set everything up before you go fly, there's really nothing else you can adjust in flight. if you've forgotten to set something up before you fly, and then you're trying to do it in the air, that can get painful, but not bad. It's just a matter of trying to aviate, navigate, and communicate in that order. You've got to keep the airplane in the sky and not fly through a cloud if, for example, your autopilot is in op. So, all right, where were we? Okay, this right here. Once you apply power to the CDU, it runs its bit test. And once it is completed running its bit test, it automatically goes into alignment mode. Right now, you have
No whisper target found.
excuse me, a flashing INS nav ready indication, which means that it is ready to navigate based on the internal navigation system with the aircraft. On the right side, you'll see these indicator buttons, or the selector buttons. Ground has the star next to it, which means that that is the mode it used to align the EG, essentially. In flight is another option. It takes longer, but you can do it while moving. And if you move the aircraft before the ground alignment is complete, it will automatically revert to in-flight alignment. And until that alignment is complete, and you've selected nav mode, and you have also selected the EG mode, things aren't going to work. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. So, because I've been sitting here explaining things, the T equals 4.0. 4.0 is the minutes. 0.8 is the accuracy. I'm guessing it's expressed as a coefficient of some other values, but 0.8 is the lowest it'll get. So, once you have 4 minutes elapsed on a ground alignment, and when it gets down to an error of 0.8, then you can select nav mode. You can press it on this OBS here, the third selector button down on the right side. It's right next to nav. If you click that one, it'll put the asterisk next to it. Jumping around a little bit here. When I powered on the CICU, that started up the other computers that deal more with navigation and waypoint information and stores. Basically, it's the computers that drive the left and right MFDs and also sends information to the HUD. So the HUD will get some information, but it won't have nav information or elapsed times or any of that stuff. So you're going to hit the rotaries on both MFDs, and lo and behold, that's already spooled up. If you turn those on immediately after you turn on the CICU, you'll see a blue screen of death, is what it looks like. It's not actually dead, that's just its startup routine. Again, if you were in a server where you suspected that failures were an option, in terms of they had enabled random failures to the systems, then you would want to run the bit tests. And you could find those on the stat page on the left MFD. Good looking out. Central Interface Control Computer. Thanks, Oz. I appreciate you looking that up. Or just knowing it, either or. All right. What do we have here? I'm looking for stat. Status. Okay. So these things all run their own bit tests, and if they are green, they've been checked. So if all these are green, you should be good. While I am on the stat page, on the left side, second from the top, I select this OS. We'll say it's the OBS button. I don't remember what they're called. We'll select the second key on the bottom over here, and you'll see the arrow next to it points down from TGP. TGP is selected, and there's an arrow on the left. So when I click that, it jumps down. Now it's saying left MFCD, and that's the one that's selected. Goes down and down. And there's a test icon next to this OBS. So if you wanted to retest something, you could. Go down here on throttle. This is something I did not know for a long time, and it caused me a huge headache. OSB. All right. Guessing that's Omni Selector button. Omni-purpose selector button. Either way, whatever the button is next to on the display, that's the context that it's in. Each button has its own function based on what the display is in. So good looking out, Draco. That could be two. On-screen button. Either or. You get to the throttle one, and you'll notice on the right side an extra option shows up for slew, and it says 4.0. The lower this number is, the faster your TGP and your map cursors will move. The TGP cursor going slow is one of the biggest pains in my butt when I first started flying because I was trying to look around through that little soda straw effect that high resolution camera gets, and it was like trying to move the straw really slowly, but you were flying too fast. Dr. Danger with the win there. He says it's the option select button. So now I'm learning too. Thank you. So up here, we are still in test mode. I'm doing this out of order here because I'm talking about stuff, and I apologize for that. In a lot of servers like Blue Flag, I'm guessing some of you have seen people playing Blue Flag before or have partaken in Blue Flag. It's a good idea to hit the select button down on the main menu from your HUD display and select air to air. When you do that, it will give you a series of pre-programmed target profiles. So I enable the MI8, leave the UH-60, I disable the 64 because there are none of those. I leave the Frogfoot. I add the SU-27 by hitting the Enter key. I add the MiG-29. There's no F-18s. There were F-16s in one version. No, Draco, we're not going for fancy production values. We're just going for you not seeing my apartment. Anyway, the F-16, you could select, you might not. I basically just put whatever is relevant to the current theater of operations and make sure that it has an asterisk next to it, because those are the options that'll be available if you have to enter dogfight mode or air-to-air mode in the HUD to try and defend yourself if your cap has all been shot down or they were terrible. That's all done. You can exit. There's a few other things and modes you can go through here. A lot of this stuff doesn't need to be changed. We'll look at weapon release data, auto scroll. I've never messed with that. I leave it alone. Maintenance is just a general modeling thing. That's something that a guy like Rough Rider might used to have worked with, is the bit test modes that are specific to the maintenance people, and so they know when something's wrong with the jet's doing. On a pilot side, you don't care. As long as it's working, you have a thumbs up, and you go break the jet. And then Rough Rider gets pissed, and then he fixes the jet. Hallo Weld. All right. Looking at display mode, you can enter there. Do not turn on auto data display. It winds up with a bunch of extra stuff, and it gets really annoying. I don't know what all it does, but I turned it on one day and I had a bad time. So we'll go with that. CCIP, gun cross, occlusion, occult. I just leave that yes. Tapes changes your displays on the right and left for altitude and airspeed to instead of numbers, thank you for the follow. Instead of numbers, it displays tapes with numbers on the side. So it's just a matter of what do you like to see. Metric, I leave no. If you are always used to thinking in metric, then that's fine. I do my targeting in metric, and I do my flying in standard, because that's what I'm used to, that's what I know, and that's what I'm familiar with. The radar altitude tape will provide a secondary tape once you're low enough for the radar altitude, or the radar altimeter, which is literally a radio shooting beams at the ground and listening for the echo and timing it. When you're close enough for it to do that reliably, it'll give you information about how close you are to the ground itself. Otherwise, your altitude data is always going to be initially based on atmospheric information. So what's the air pressure doing? And that's how you determine what your altitude is, not how far you actually are from the ground. You can set your airspeed in whatever manner you prefer. Indicated airspeed is the one that I prefer because indicated airspeed is the one that directly relates to how the aircraft is performing at any altitude. An indicated airspeed of, for example, 200 knots at sea level is going to be pretty close to 200 knots ground speed. An indicated airspeed of 200 knots at 30,000 feet is going to be a lot closer to 350 knots ground speed. Um, for example, when you're flying in an airliner, chances are their indications on airspeed are not much over 250 to, I don't even know what the top end of the airliner would be, but it would depend on the airliner. However, at 35,000 feet, the ground speed is quite a bit later. No, Weld, I'm not saying tapes only work radar altitude. I'm saying that if you turn on the radar altitude tape, it will give you one specifically for that. The other tapes is just a way to display that. Um, just a way to look at the information. It's still going to give you the same information in the other one. Vertical velocity is a mirror of this gauge right here. And you can put it on there if you want. I find it easier to look at this when I need to because if I'm looking straight ahead, I'm paying attention to what's outside and don't really care what my vertical velocity is unless maybe I was in the clouds. But if I'm in the clouds, I'm going to be focused on a combination of all my instruments just looking back and forth all the time. And so I'm not really going to care whether I have that information here or here, personally. Okay, so I was a little low there, Keen. Thank you. So 310 to 340 gets you a ground speed of 550, let's say, depending on if you're going east or west and prevailing winds and whatnot. IFF alert, something Ralphie puts on. They haven't really modeled it in the game. Once in a while, you'll get something going IFF from Bitch and Betty, and basically just means that a radar has looked at you. I have not been able to discern any context on how that works, and none of the IFF stuff is declassified enough to really know what's going on. You can infer some of the basics, but the actual operations are pretty much a mystery in terms of what's available unclassified. So that's probably a good thing, but it is what it is. The IFF panel, while I'm thinking about it, is this one over here. Doesn't really do anything in the game. You can turn some of these switches. Some of them do stuff. You can put that to standby, and it powers the panel, and the lights light up, and you can zeroize that. And you can set your codes, but essentially, it's just all there for show. It would be very helpful if that stuff was modeled, if nothing else, from a transponder perspective, if there was an ATC, player-controlled ATC in DCS, but there really isn't. So, all right, that pretty much covers everything up here. I exit that. I don't need to run the GCAS training, but that's something that you can do during training missions. Basically, it sets a hard deck above the actual ground so that you can practice diving and knowing when to pull up at the last second and still make it. It really is just a training mode. Once you've configured everything you want, you can left-click the IFFCC button and set your HUD to normal mode. And the reason I diverted over to here and went this route is so that I could discuss all that before switching to normal mode, because the upfront controller can't be used to input things unless the HUD is in normal mode. Draco's explanation there is pretty good. I'm neither going to confirm nor deny that, but that's a pretty good gist of it. So I went off on that tangent so that I could get back to here. On your, let's say this is on the, let's say this other left one looked like the right one. I just acknowledge that message with the option select button, 11, on the right MFD, and you'll notice that that little message went away and the note went away. And when the note went away, some more information came back. Osnerall's looking out again. Integrated flight and fire control computer. And Oz is on point today. He should be given this class. No joke. Um, brain fart. Oh yeah. So assuming that this display still looked like this one, there would be a stat button right here, which, hey, it's still there. So you click the stat button, and that brings you up to this first page. These are all empty sockets. These are all configured. I clicked next. That brought me up over here. All these are green except the EPLARs. For whatever reason, they chose the EPLARs acronym. I don't remember what it stands for, but EPLARs and JTARs are the same thing. EPLARs and JTARs are a line of sight radio Wi-Fi network is the best way to think about it. So I'm sure there's a much better and more technical way to explain that, but essentially if your EPLAR's radio, which is the JTARs, is enabled and it can see someone else who's operating on the same network or configured to operate on the same frequency, channel, all that stuff, they'll talk to each other and share information. So that's data link. When someone else comes within line of sight and signal range, then they'll pop up. Now, they might all three be spread apart, but the one in the middle is now relaying back and forth. So each one of them has a little bit of the picture, but if you can see one, you can get the whole picture. And Oz is looking out again, and he says EPLARS is Enhanced Position Location Reporting System. So I'm sure that there is some bridge in there where the position reporting system talks to the EG and gets its location information, and then that and the JTARs talk back and forth inside the jet, and they do their thing and make their sweet communications love, and then they broadcast that over the antenna, and when those talk to one another, then you all get the whole picture with the link 16 or data link. It's an incredibly handy tool, and the ability to share that target location and friendly location information quickly is a very helpful way to avoid friendly fire, but you can't rely on it. It's good for situational awareness, but in the same way that the FAA has made some really fancy advancements and then said they're not good enough to be precision, the same is true of that. It could fail, and so you can't just assume that if something doesn't show up on EPLARs that it is hostile, because things go wrong. And that's an in real life consideration. In the game, generally, if everyone's got their stuff configured right, EPLARs is going to work. Okay, so I came to this page, scrolled down, throttle, the slew. I was talking about how slow it was before. The lower that number, the better. So I come up here and I type 0, then I hit the letter key, which is now going to give me a decimal. And then when that little L went away on the right side there, here I'll hit it again. We'll see if it goes away. Nope, it's not going to go away. I'll type another decimal, and then the L goes away, and after it goes away, then you can hit 1. Figured that out the hard way. I would try and hit these two quickly, and it would be 0 point alpha. And then I would try and store it, and it didn't like that. It knows it needs numbers, and so when you try and give it letters, it's pissed. So I set that 0.1, and once that's in the scratch pad up here, and saved there, then I put it down here and it pastes it into whichever that is. So any place you see brackets, you can paste that information in. Slew of 0.1. It's kind of a catch-22 using this. If you're far away and trying to zero your targeting pod on something, it's going to be moving really quick, and so you're going to have to be real gentle and patient. And remember that when you get closer, having the TGP slew faster is going to help. It's just a trade-off, but it's a trade-off that I personally like to make every time. Every time I forget, I'm angry. All right, that's configured. You can hit previous. That's all good. Now you can go to TAD. Tactical Awareness Display. And this is where your Link 16 broadcasts all of your information to everyone else, and where you can get your map displays and all that stuff. Oh, that's why. So right now I'm using my joystick. Unfortunately, guys, I don't know the keyboard bindings for all these. If you have a Thrustmaster, Warthog, HOTAS, things should all be pretty well aligned out of the box. You plug it in, and for me at least, it just was plug and play. The buttons all talk to the ones they were supposed to, and when I hit a button on my joystick, it did the same thing in real life. I'm pushing up on that button right now. It's a 4-position switch. And pushing up is adjusting these. Those are all different runways, or airports, I should say, not runways, but airports. This is my initial position as calculated. So wherever the alignment occurs, that's where it's going to be. Ecoke, good looking out on the key bindings. Thank you, sir. That's mission 1, and we've established some waypoints here just to give us a brief way to go through some navigation stuff. So scrolling up and down on the data management switch, or the DMS, is how you do that. What I was attempting to do, on your throttle, there's a coolie hat, and it's that one on the left right there. So here's your mic switch, and your slew cursor is the bigger dish-shaped one there. Your coolie hat is this one. So if you tap your coolie hat left, it cycles through your pages. If you hold it left, it selects that MFD as your sensor of interest and puts that green box around it. Once the green box is around it, now thanks TrackIR, when I push the DMS up and down, it's going to zoom that view. So I'm hitting down right now and it zooms out, and I'm hitting up and it zooms in. And eventually, if there's no map available for that level of accuracy, it'll just be black. But you can cheat that by zooming out until you get the best resolution map, and then on this upper left OSB, selecting from auto to manual. So you have to press it twice. When you do that and zoom back out, it's going to show that level of map accuracy across the entire map. That's another catch-22 when it comes to trying to read the map, because if I go to zoom in over here, I might not have data pertinent to that level of viewing. So in this one, it's showing the terrain features in a little bit different way. It's showing major airports in a different way, showing railroads, roads, all that stuff. And as I zoom in, the level of detail changes. Now you've got antennas and other threats and their altitudes, and you've got some NDBs listed. Then you zoom all the rest of the way in, and you get to an even finer level of detail, which over here comes all the way down to this one, which looks like about a 1 in 50,000 map, maybe. Anyway, we'll scroll the cursor back over here. And to change the cursor mode, you can cycle that. This little red switch here goes forward and backwards. That's called the China hat. If you tap it forwards, while this is your selected display and you're in the TAD view, it's going to cycle between these modes. This one is just going to follow the jet and stay centered on it. Oh no, Primus. If you want to try and reset it, you can. It doesn't take long to get back to this point. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised there are not more people. Well, yeah, I guess there are a few people in here. Okay. Well, if you just want to let it alone, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll see what happens. We'll just play it by ear. I think everyone's going to be pretty forgiving here. So I can swap modes. The first mode, you'll see in the top, it does the EXP1 and EXP2, and that changes the overall level of zoom. So EXP2 is going to be more zoomed in. It's going to give you more information sooner, and you won't be able to zoom out as far. The 160 mode is going to give you a huge area of interest, but you're not going to be able to zoom in terribly close. I mean, obviously you can still get in closer than the map is available, but it's not as good. And also, this is always oriented with the front of the aircraft up. If you hit the China hat forward and go to the EXP modes, north is always up. So you'll see I zoom in and my aircraft is pointing northwest there. You can kind of see the nose right there and the right wingtip and the engines down there and the left wingtip. And we can confirm that by looking right here at our HSI, and I'm showing between west and north. So northwest. Whoa. Okie dokie. Where were we working here? Oz Primus is the server this time. I had some worries about me being able to host DCS with multiple people joining and also be able to stream without it just crashing constantly or slowing my computer way down. So Primus was very kind and volunteered to run that. So thank you, Primus. It's awesome. What was I discussing? EXP1 and 2. So that's how you zoom in and out. You see EXP2 zoomed me way farther in. Now I can see my distance from the runway center line even. And that's because it's in manual mode that the resolution of this map is so poor. If I switch back to auto, it vanishes. Whichever mode you select manual in is the level of map that it's going to stay at. So if I go back to manual now, all the maps will be at this level. And I can zoom all the way back in, and I've got that view now. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to leave it in the best one that's available out here on the east side of the country, Georgia. Okay. Now, earlier we had a stores configuration warning that popped up. That has since gone away because I was touching the coolie hat on the throttle there. But I can get that back, and you can modify any of this bottom row of buttons by pressing and holding the button. So I'm pressing and holding message, and now it shows display program, and it gives me TAD, TGP, DSMS, MSG, CDU, etc. These are all the different options you can have displayed on each button on the bottom. In this case, I want to have the load page. So I click that, it highlights, and now I have to select which button I want it on. So I'm going to replace the message button with the load button. Now you'll notice that the load button has overtaken it, and I press it again, and now it's back to those initial screens that showed up when the CICU powered up. Because this is the first time I'm flying the aircraft for the day, I hit load all. There's an asterisk over here on this one. The asterisk has vanished from these four. When the asterisk comes back, that's when you know that the DTS has been uploaded and you've got all of your information. And it's back. So loading on either MFD reverts both MFDs to load mode and makes them inoperable. You can't do anything with the MFDs while it's loading. So obviously if you've forgotten to do that and you're in flight, make sure you don't plan on needing your MFDs, excuse me, MFCDs. I'm using MFDs and MFCDs interchangeably. MFD is multifunction display, MFCD is multifunction color display, and obviously the only difference is one is capable of displaying in color. So I'm just going to be using those terms interchangeably because I don't feel like doing the PC thing and trying to remember all the time what I'm saying. I'm shifting responsibility. All right, so now that that's been loaded, basically the memory card or the flash drive that the crew chief has, for putting it in simple terms, has been stuffed in the bottom of the aircraft somewhere, and it has all the information on what kind of maps are needed and what kind of route has been programmed by their computers, and it's got the stores information on it as well. So their MFD knows what the stores that they're planning on hanging are, and so they upload all that information and put it on that drive, and then the crew chief sticks it in there. And so that's why before the Dismiss page had a bunch of red boxes instead of green boxes. So now you've got a list of all the aircraft in which store. 6 is the center, 11 is the right wingtip, 1 is the left wingtip, and everything in between. On this one, I've got 2 AIM-9s, which are heaters, an AGM-65D, which is a thermal infrared sighted camera that runs an air-to-ground missile, GBU-38, which is a GPS INS-based bomb, so it's got a guidance program similar to the one that's in the CICU or associated with the CICU. It actually gets its initial information from the CICU, and if you do not have your alignment correct, where this is flashing, and you select a GBU-38 for your stores and hang it and load it and go fly, instead of saying ALN ready, it's going to say ALN UNS, and that's alignment unset. And that just means that the bomb doesn't know where it's at well enough when you drop it to know where it needs to go. So later on when you're using your TGP, which is basically a really fancy, really high resolution gimbaled camera with infrared capability, when you're using that to try and find stuff on the ground, the bomb isn't going to know where you're actually telling it to go, and it's not going to try and drop. There may be an override for it that I have never attempted, but yeah, no, it would be bad. That's how people wind up bombing schools and stuff on accident. All right. On the left wing is a GBU-12. Underneath it, you'll see a lase code. 1688 is the currently selected lase code. Now, the lase code means that a laser, literally just a laser, is being beamed out. I don't know what the spectrum is, but I suspect it is infrared laser. If not, then it might be an ultraviolet laser. It's not a visible laser is the point. It is in a spectrum other than the visible spectrum. That laser is pulsed at a varying frequency, and the software in the jet, in the targeting pod, and in all laser-guided munitions is capable of distinguishing which frequency it's looking for. So it's kind of like having a frequency filter, if you will, or a polarization filter. If it's flashing at the wrong speed, the munition, TGP, etc., can't see it, or it disregards it, one or the other. Whatever the case may be, having the different lase codes is what allows multiple precision-guided laser munitions to be used in the same location without fear of bombs hitting incorrect targets. 1688 is the standard default for the A-10's stores and also for its TGP. So if you hop in a server and you go to bomb something, it's just going to work out of the box. The downside is if you and 3 friends are all trying to lase things, the bombs are going to be going all different places. And if you're dropping a bomb on a target and attempting to lase it, but your friend has another one nearby and your bomb sees his first, it's going to try and get there. But if you're dropping this way and he's dropping this way and you just happen to see his target, it might not be able to steer over there and it's going to land somewhere in between and just kind of vanish. Unless you're looking at the screen and looking outside, you might never know where it goes. So that's where the lase codes come into play, is making sure that you're all deconflicted, as the term is. If you deconflict lase codes, one of the easiest ways I have done for doing this is matching your lase codes for your munitions and your TGP to your JTARs, which also needs to be deconflicted. And we'll go ahead and do that now. Before I do that, the last thing here is a captive AGM-65K. I intended to put regular ones on. I'm not sure what that's about. I have some illumination flares because those can be very handy. And the ALQ-184, which is an electronic warfare pod. It's a jammer pod, and it basically just puts out a whole bunch of electronic signals in differing frequencies, and that's a whole bunch of magic. And yeah, I'm not the tech that works on that stuff, has ever worked on that stuff, has ever really dealt with it. And I have a friend who is, but I can't ask him about all that, so it is what it is. I mean, I can ask. He's not going to talk about it. The moral of this story is the ALQ 184 is for purely a matter of cosmetic reasons my preferred jamming pod. I don't know if there's a functional difference between the 184 or the 181. The 181 just looks like a big box, and I think it looks dumb. The 184, I have noticed that it can help decrease the firing ranges of some SAMs, and that it can confuse fighter radar when they're trying to pursue you, especially if you're cycling it on and off abruptly, which is something you can do in the A10 but not the F-15. Alrighty. Going back to the TAD, you'll notice on the bottom here, there is a N with some numbers and an E with some numbers. Well, we're in the northern hemisphere in the country of Georgia, which is just south of Sochi, where they had the Winter Olympics. Tom Clancy had a real hard-on for this country and liked to set most of his fictional conflicts in or around the country of Georgia. So, same place. Um, I imagine that's because they're a NATO member and also very close to Russia and also kind of not getting along great with them. Anyway, on the TAD display, you can select between latitude longitude display, lat long, and MGRS. MGRS stands for Military Grid Reference System, and the simple version is that instead of using a system where one number can correspond to different distances, they use a system where every number corresponds to the same difference, or distance, excuse me. So if I press my F10 map here, hit F12 to close that window, press F10, that brings up this map. Got a couple tankers flying around. So this is latitude, longitude. And you can see that the lines curve over here and curve over here. And just the way that the map is chosen to display, it's, the globe is processing around to the right like this. And so it kind of warps. And the closer you get to the north, the narrower your lines of latitude are. Because each degree accounts for less distance across the ground when you're going east-west. I don't like that mode for targeting. I have gotten very comfortable with military grid reference system through personal experience, prior experience. And if troops on the ground are ever going to give an A-10 a position, it's going to be in MGRS format. So my understanding is that most A-10 pilots use MGRS for all target-related needs. If they were trying to deconflict their own airspace, it might be in their best interest to use lat long, just because those numbers are bigger, for lack of better term. Let's see here, left. Well, I don't know what all that's about, and now I've hit a whole bunch of buttons. Somebody told me the quick way to change the grid reference on this top portion here so that it'll display lat long versus MGRS on the fly. And if someone remembers that, please feel free to throw it in the chat. Um, Left Alt Y, good looking out. I was thinking W for some reason. So I hit left Alt Y and nothing happens, and I'm like, well,
Hey,
fuck.
Colt,
Send it.
it's on the right-hand side top. LL and MGRS.
Right, that's where you find the overlay for the displays. I'm trying to
Oh,
find the cursor reference number changer, which they
I
said is
got you.
left Alt Y.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so now I'm in lat long mode, and this line corresponds with, looks like 57 east, and that's going to be, what am I looking at here? There's 33, there's 33 and a half, and there's 34 degrees east, and 34 and a half, and 35 degrees east, so forth and so on. Anyway, those degree numbers still correspond to the same lines all the way up and down because the lines converge. MGRS does not do that. The world is broken up into different map chunks, and I'm going to probably go off on how to read MGRS at a different time, but the simple way is it's you start in the bottom left always. I'm going to hit left alt Y again, and that's going to, okay, that's giving an X and a Z coordinate and altitude as well, which is interesting. It must be for map purposes, like building maps. And now I'm back to lat long. And now I'm back to MGRS. So if I go over here, this whole chunk of map that is oriented kind of like this, or for your perspective like this, over here on the left side, that's 35. I jump over to this map section, and it's 36. I jump over to this map section, and it's 37. I jump over to this map section, and it's 38. And let me see if I can find this link and post. I think I have, that's not the button I wanted. It's not the button you're looking for. Yes. So, with this map, or with this website, you can learn through trial and error basically everything you want to know about MGRS. But anyway, it's broken down. It starts from bigger chunks of map and getting smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in over here. We're going to zoom it down. We're in 3/8 Tango. Tango is going to be longitudinal. 3/8 is going to be latitudinal. So because this map is mostly oriented east to west, it's going to be, yes, we'll do classy. It's going to be Tango. Mike refers to a submap. So this is the first 10,000 grid identifier. See, the 3738 Tango, those three combined is the 100,000 kilometer identifier. Kilometer, meter. I'll get back to you on that. The Mike is the 10,000 identifier. Inside that, they're broken down. Oh, excuse me. These are 100,000. These are 10,000. So now it breaks down. So you have Mike, Niner 1. So inside the Mike box, we are 9/10 of the way over and 1/10 of the way up. You zoom in, hey, that's Niner 1. So the first number is always an easting, and the second number is always a northing. Inside the Mike Niner 1, we are, oh, that looks like about 7 of the way to the east, and we are about 3 to the north. And I can compare that on the top left of the screen right now. It says Mike Niner 7 001 13 233, and then it gives an elevation. So Mike Niner is the first digit for the easting, and that's this whole one, and 1 is the first digit for the northing, and that's this whole one. Inside that, now you have Niner 7, so you're 7/10 of the way across the 9, so forth and so on. Basically, you can keep breaking it down, and if you have all 5 digits for both easting and northing, or what's called a 10-digit grid, then your grid is accurate within 1 meter square. That's accurate enough for precision fire. fires, excuse me. So you can move your cursor and you'll zoom way in, and I'll hit satellite. And if I move a meter across the ground right here to the west, that's a meter, and that's a meter, and that's a meter, and that's a meter. So that's how it works. If something is east of a target and you have the grid and they say it's 300 meters east, you add a 3 to the hundreds digit of the easting, and now you have a new grid. And that's why I like MGRS. Because if they say it's 250 meters northeast, I'm going to add 200 east and I'm going to add 200 north. And if I, for whatever reason, couldn't find it in the TGP before, I can do the little math on my kneeboard real quick and plug that puppy into my CDU, which we'll get into. And that'll give me a new precision location from the computer that I can automatically turn the camera to and look. So that's what MGRS is nice for. It's also nice when it comes to adjusting fires for artillery, but we don't have to worry about that here, so that's neither here nor there. I'm going to revert this to altitude mode, and I always disable lat long. So as a matter of personal opinion, when I am playing this game, especially, well, just always for me personally, I have altitude selected so that it is showing me terrain contours and city features and roads and borders. And I have MGRS selected so that these displays don't overlap with the lat long, because otherwise then, okay, is it in this chunk or this chunk? I know that the lines are blue and black, but it still gets so confusing. Goodbye, latitude, longitude. Be gone. This is not civil aviation that we're simulating, so there's no reason to worry about it. If someone ever asks for your grid in DCS, they're going to want your 100,000 identifier with your 10,000 information. So 10,000 meters means that each of these lines should be 10 kilometers apart. Excuse me. I might be screwing this up again. I'm going to have to do some more reading on MGRS before I do an actual... I guess it would probably be a Learning Sim Sundays event. We might just have a whole one about reading MGRS and how to decipher and what the different parts are, because situational awareness is so key in this, and knowing what you're looking for and where it's at relative to you and everything else is critical. Anyway, that's that. These should be 10 kilometers apart, so that's a good way to judge scale. And that scale is good enough. You can see how fast this KC-135 is going. He's got a ground speed of 219 knots, and he's just flying around out there. So if you're flying a jet, that's a pretty good indication of where someone's at. Mike 74. Okay, and then you tell him your angels or your altitude in thousands of feet. Same thing. And that'll give the person who's out here a good idea where to look for. Yeah, my concern is I'm saying 10,000 when I should be saying 100,000, because the 100,000 identifier, I believe, was it area? Duck of Doom, yes, it is a blow-up bed. It's the biggest thing I have that wasn't just completely awful. And gave me a, it's some fancy stuff. Sure is fancy. We're getting there, guys. I'll get a green screen one of these days. Okay, so that's map stuff, and that is why latitude, longitude sucks, is basically what I was getting to with that. Long dissertation, but the moral of the story is you come back over here to your TAD page, and let's see. This is the normal view. If you click this, if you click the TAD function on the upper left OBS, it jumps in here, and I think I might have lied to you. This is the controls. TAD is the normal display view. I lied to you before, and I apologize for that. Latitude, longitude is what this LL is. So while you're getting set up on the ground, click that thing. Get this puppy over here into MGRS. Wherever your cursor highlights something, I'm going to reselect this as the primary, it'll give you the MGRS coordinate of whatever is highlighted. Okay. Yeah, I feel like Oz should probably just be giving this class at this rate. He's teaching me about as much as I am. Any of you. Ah. Yeah, Hawks, if you're not shown in the map and you don't have a general idea of where you're at just by terrain association, so looking outside and going, okay, well, I knew I took off from here and I flew this direction and this is what the terrain looks like, and I'll compare it to the map. If you can't do that, you hit left control and then hit F10. Bam. It zooms way in on your present location. You can zoom in and you can zoom out. It's going to zoom in and default to this zoom level, but you can just zoom back out. Hey, what do you know? I don't know what's going on with the view there. It's like it's sideways or something. That's different. Anyway, it's going to default here. All you got to do is scroll out. Like 3 mouse wheel scrolls gets me to Mike 9 or 1, and I know roughly where I'm at. All right, net. This is where you're going to configure your identification stuff for your JTARS and EPLARS information, that they're hand in hand for the purposes that we're doing. I broke it and sent the video into ice. Oh. Haven't done anything with trim, Duck. We're still working on systems. All right, so I clicked that before I had anything in here, and now it says CICU input error. And you're like, well, that sucks. But that's a pretty easy fix. There's a clear button right here on the upfront controller. Or if for some reason you wanted to be putting stuff in down here, it says CICU input error in the scratch pad, which is the bottom line on here. And again, pretty easy fix. There's a clear button right here. Cleared that out. It's blank. Everybody's happy. So I like to run my own ID as 13, and this is just a matter of personal preference, but thank you. I didn't see who that was, but thank you. I like to run as 13, so I put 13 in my scratch pad right here, and I set that as my own ID. And then group ID 45. So everyone who is in your same group is going to show up as purple on the TAD. So as you guys finish setting everything up here in the map as we get closer to takeoff, we should see some more purple pop up on here. And you guys might already be set right now, but I have my JTAR set to off. I personally leave my EPLARS JTAR switch off until I have the net configured, just so you might have noticed before in multiplayer servers, if you've played before, multiple jets will be flashing indications on the map, and it gets really annoying because if they're trying to show you where something's at by broadcasting information to the general map, you'll see that information scooting all over the place, and it gets really cluttered and painful. So guys, always set your net info. Every time. Don't ever forget. It's bad. It pisses people off. It makes hair fall out. Just set it, please. If you and friends are operating together, pick a group ID. Find one that's not used. There's only so many people in here, so just pick one that works for you. 71, 69, giggity. You know, whatever your favorite is. Just don't set 0101 for your information there, because people are going to be complaining in all chat. Myself and the hardcore guys run Group 4-5. I know a lot of people also use Group 4-5 just because Linebacker has offered some tutelage in 104th server before. But really, you want to run the same group ID as the people you're working with. You don't want to have everyone on the same server running the same group ID, because then you're getting more information than you really need from people you don't need the information from. So, same flight, same group ID. You set your own ID within that. And now I have a 4-digit number, 1345. Well, that's how people can get a hold of you with the messages function. We'll go into that later. I'm going to leave that on messages tab so that I can remember. Once I've entered my net ID or my net information, I can click Tab again, and that brings me back to this page. This button over here on the left cycles what the cursor is going to, sorry for the vibration here, I was complaining about that earlier. I wish they had a Hall sensor on the slider on the Thrustmaster Warthog, just so it wouldn't jump like that. Alrighty, what do we got here? We've got own and hook. That's what I was going for. So right now it's displaying whatever is hooked to self, basically. Own and self are the same thing, which means that the arrow is going from there to here. So from that target to me, that is what this information is. It's 120 for 17. So this waypoint is 17 nautical miles northwest of me, but 120, you'll notice, is southeast, or east-southeast, really. So it's straight out off my nose, but from it, I am southeast, and that's why it's got hook own. You can switch that, though. You can say own hook. So now I have 300 for 17. Lo and behold, 300 and 17 nautical miles that way, and I'll find a waypoint out there. Yeah, if you can be bothered to memorize the keyboard shortcut for typing on here and clicking the OBS and have the time to set autopilot and manage all that, then great. Yeah, the message function could be handy, especially if you had a touchpad hooked up to your computer and you could just actually type on the CDU. That's something I have fantasized about almost in terms of having a fuller cockpit here, is just having the CDU available when someone has a location and they're trying to talk you on. Sometimes someone's not getting it, and it's really painful to try and describe where things are on the ground, which is why the Air Force has a whole job devoted to people on the ground telling people in the sky where they're at. And those are TAC-Ps, which can train up and become JTACs later on in their careers. It's a painful process, but not painful, exciting, but very in-depth. Yeah, no kidding, Oz. That layout does suck. Thank you, civilian FMS computer inspiration. Can we please go next gen? Okay, where were we? So you can cycle through hook, own, hook, bowls. So there's a bowls position set on this map. I'm going to click this one to zoom all the way out to here, and I'll move my cursor over. And now if I click this, see, I've moved the cursor all the way out to the Black Sea from eastern portion of Georgia. Russia is up here on this side of the mountains, and if I have my geography right, this is all Turkey down here. This little wedge through the middle, that's Georgia. So on west side of Georgia, right on the coast, there's a bullseye point. Bullseye is something you might be familiar with from BMS if you played that, and if not, it is essentially just a reference point. It's used to reference bogey locations by AWACS. It's used to reference your location or target locations. Basically, it's just so everyone who is listening in to a conversation is on the same page about where something is at. The downside is the A10 is the only one that has the capability to have Bulls information displayed. I actually don't even remember how to display Bulls information on the HUD, but there is a way to do it. So you can have Bulls information, but A10s are operating in a much smaller, slower speed environment, and they're referencing things on the ground anyway. So they're concerned with the names of towns, where the roads and lakes are, where the towers are. What can they see looking outside the cockpit to help them identify what their target is? That's what A10 pilots care about. Anyway, you can reference Bulls, and if I move the cursor up here and then take this thing and get it out of Michael J. Fox mode, there we go. I'll just go all the way in. And I hit that China hat, which is the red one right down there. If I hit that China hat once short, it brings it over here. So it zoomed all the way in, or it didn't zoom in, excuse me. It centered on the cursor and oriented the maps to north. So this is the Black Sea, and this is the eastern part of the Caucasus region. That's where I was. But now I don't have to scroll all the way because I could scroll faster in the zoomed out view. Anyway, Bulls is over here at the town of Poti, just next to this river delta here. I'm sorry if I butchered that pronunciation and someone actually knows how to say it. Such is life. All right. What else do we need to talk about on the TAD? I think that just about covers TAD information. On the left side here, you'll see a 7. I'm not sure why there's a question mark. I've never bothered to learn. That's something Oz might know. Maybe he'll care to elaborate. The 7 is just referencing the waypoint. I'm guessing the question mark means it's asking, do you want me to... Oh, well, there you go. There's a tooltip. Copy hook as mission waypoint. So you put that cursor over it, and you want that to be your mission waypoint. You go, bam. And now it's copied. This thing is switched over here. I'm getting that out of lat long mode. Now it's in UTM. Universal Transverse Mercator is the type of map information used to generate that, but it's MGRS. UTM and MGRS, for the purposes of this, are synonymous. MGRS, again, is Military Grid Reference System. All right, the TGP page. Hey, that's off. Okay, well, you're on the ground, and you're going to want to use that potentially right after you take off. So, yep, Oz says makes new waypoint. Good shit, Oz. Thank you. Turn the TGP on. Not timed out. Okay, well, that's not a big deal. It just means that it takes 3 minutes for this thing to run its internal tests and get all the sensors that it needs to warmed up and cooled down and all sorts of different stuff. The sensors in thermal cameras are required to be much colder than the things they're trying to look at, and that's how they see things of differing temperature. So it takes a while for the coolant system in the refrigerant system in the ass end of this camera to get enough refrigerant in that there to cool it down. But you'll see as it's running this, it's doing its thing. It still says the forward-looking infrared function is hot. And it's telling you the version and all that stuff, and you really don't care what all that stuff is. You're just waiting for that to go away and to say not timed out. Dismiss page. Yeah, Primus, we might have to restart this. All of my weapons have vanished. This is interesting. We'll restart this and try again. And if that doesn't work, then we'll go from there. If it fails again, we'll go from there. I'm going to go ahead and back out. I suggest you guys do the same, and then he can bring it down, and then we'll bring it back up.
You actually want me to restart the server?
Yes, please, if you would. I think it's starting to do fucky stuff. I don't know if you watched that Ralphie Dude video, but sometimes the glitches pile up slowly, and sometimes it's just a full-on crash. So we can try again, and if it doesn't work again, then I'll just try hosting, and if that doesn't work, then we'll probably just have to change the password and keep fewer people in it, and everybody will have to follow along on their own stuff. But this will give us a chance to reiterate the startup procedure to this point, hit it all a little faster now that we've covered a lot of the information, and then we'll move forward.
Server's up.
Cool. I'm hitting the refresh button, and there's the server, and I'm putting in my server password. And she's loading. Thank you, sir. All right, so now we're back to a fully cold A10. we'll go through this a little faster this time. First steps, battery and inverter both set to on. On the left side, APU generator set to start. Or sorry, not generator, just the APU. APU is auxiliary power unit, which again, you can hear is a tiny jet engine mounted in the fuselage, and it generates electrical power more than the battery can provide, so that you can start running other systems. Also, when you go to start the engines, the exhaust from the APU is diverted into the engine to spin it up. So that's all come up to speed. That's 100. That's 400. Turn the generator on. We turn the EGI on. We turn the CDU on. We come over to the left side. We turn the CDU on. We turn the IFCC, or the IFFCC to test. We press enter. This is the takeoff trim button. If you've been flying or the jet was broken, it's a good idea to hit it and hold it, and it'll recenter your trim configuration. Someone talking? I thought somebody said something. Okay, so I shut the canopy so I can hear me think and hear you think and all that stuff. I hit my oxygen while I'm here.
Pull
Those
up.
are all set. That's all running.
Altitude.
That's already run through its blue screen startup procedure, and we are ready to load all because we already have our stores on the aircraft. The DSMS inventory, CMBT, I'm guessing is combat or combative or... See, I didn't think, Oz, that it had bleed air on the APU. I think that it diverts... Well, maybe it does. Maybe it does. It's a great question. If I can't find out or you can't find a source, then I will email a friend of mine and see if he can let me know. Because I'm kind of curious now. I didn't think that the APU had sufficient size to have bleed air diversion, and that could be wrong. Okay, IFCC has run its PUDI, and I'm going to exit, and then I'm going down one and hitting enter, and I'm coming back up here, and I'm configuring this stuff, I'm turning off that one, and I'm adding this one, and that's going to be good. And that's enough for me. That's all the stuff I want to configure. I'm setting it to norm. Well, 400C is well within their normal operating, ranges. So, I mean, even 700 is well within the engine's operating range. It can go up to 850 when it's doing its thing. I just wouldn't expect that the bleed section of an APU would have enough oomph to turn the engine over. Well, Rough Rider says it's coming from the bleeder on the APU. You guys, you're probably right. I just, thinking about it, didn't think that they would have enough. So, like I said, I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm just trying to share some info. Okay. Procedures, next steps. This is aligning. You'll see the 2.4 is counting up. Every 6 seconds, this thing will tick, because every 6 seconds is a tenth of a minute. That's ticking up. This other one's ticking down. It's in ground mode. This is not flashing, so we're just going to let it be. I'm going to go ahead and hit the generators for the engines. The A10s that I've seen in person, even fully stopped, these switches are just left in power mode. I think that from that I'm inferring that A10 operations SOP is just to leave those forward all the time. I don't think it matters if they're forward or aft, except that the master caution is going to go off. And obviously you can just silence the master caution by pressing the button. This little thing I didn't talk about earlier. It's telling me all the things that are broken or not running yet. So this is navigation mode. These are right generator, right fuel pressure, left fuel pressure, right wing pump, left wing pump, right main pump, left main pump. Oil pressures, this is the ejection seat, hydraulic pressures, anti-lock brakes. These are part of your autopilot control stuff. This is your ground collision avoidance system, which I would have to read way more in depth to understand how the GCAS interacts with all the other systems. But the way it's been going, Oz might know that stuff and might care to share, might not. I've got my computers thinking. This is already loaded. I'm going to go to TAD mode. I'm going to hit lat long. Oh, and also to start it cooling down, I'm going to get my TGP cooling. That's a combat measure. If it were an actual A10, I don't know that that would be advisable because there's not going to be any airflow through the cooling vanes on the back end. So it might be bad. It might overheat the unit if you have it set to on when you're sitting on the ground. That's just speculation on my part. Doesn't really mean anything in the sim. Okay, that's on. I set that to MGRS. I'm clicking net. I am entering my own ID of 13 because why not? And I'm entering 45 because why not? If you're in a flight, you all pick your group, that's fine. If you're all using your same group in your wing, makes good sense. Your own IDs, I use 13 when I'm just kind of doing my own thing because it's just a number I like and easy to remember. It's just muscle memory at this point. If I'm flying with a bunch of guys and I actually want to know who is who, then when we're organizing before we fly, we say, okay, so and so is 1. That's the leader. 2's flying his wing. 3 is taking the second element. 4 is on his wing. So forth and so on. So you can set 01, 02, 03, 04 within group ID, and then you'll know. As long as you know who's 1, 2, 3, and 4 in your flight, then you know when you look at the numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is who it is. So you go through all that. Let's see. That's configured. I can turn my JTARs on. I can do this, and this, and this. And lo and behold, that to map view. Lo and behold, there's a couple other guys here now that I have the JTARs on. Someone picked 69. Giggity. All right. That's all there. I think that's probably enough. The TGP is doing its thing. It still says FLIR hot, but now it's in standby. Okay, so now it's in full standby mode. The infrared is ready to go. All you have to do is select air-to-air or air-to-ground mode, and it comes on. The camera comes out, and it's happy. Set that back to standby for now. The dismiss is here. Everything's good. That has a good alignment. You can set your GBU 12's lase code. So let's do that while we're here. You want to configure your laser to lase for your own bombs, and that's it. So because I'm 1345, I'm going to set that as my lase code. There's no conflict for that in the game. I don't know what the lase code ranges are in real life. Someone sent me a message. Number 69, Group 45, sent me balls. Thanks, 69. I'm acknowledging that to clear it, and setting that, we'll say to Mav mode. The Mavericks, the infrared Mavericks take 3 minutes to cool down the FLIR sensor and initialize, and I believe all the rest of them also take 3 minutes, but I almost always use deltas, so I'm not going to say for certain that the other ones take any less or more than 3 minutes. But anyway, the EO is the electro-optical. You set that to on, it enters align mode, and you get a countdown, or a count up, excuse me, EO. When that hits 3 minutes, then your Mavericks are available to use. Draco says turbines use an air starter. It's basically like an electric starter, but uses air, like an air tool, to turn the shaft. As far as I know, GCAS is part of the last low-altitude safety and targeting enhancement system and also provides the enhanced attitude control, which in turn provides your autopilot and the PAC precision attitude control, which stabilizes your gun when activated by the first stage of the gun trigger. So Oz has spent a lot of time working in the systems to know exactly how they integrate with one another, how they talk to one another, and what they're doing. That's freaking awesome, man. Not gonna lie, that's incredible. It's more time than I have spent trying to memorize that stuff. I I basically just learned what I needed to know to make it function. So, awesome. Let's see here. All right, what are we doing? I'm gonna blur through this again real quick. Battery, inverter, APU on. That comes up. APU generator, EGI, CDU, CICU, IFCC, enter. That runs its tests. This comes up. Those come on. In the meantime, keeping an eye on this thing. We're at 4.0 and 0.8. When that's at about 2.5 minutes, generally during my startups, that's when I starting my engines. Usually takes like a minute and 15 seconds for me to get both engines started. And in doing so, at 4 minutes, when I enter the nav mode right here, and then I switch over to EG navigation mode, then I'm ready to taxi immediately. So go back to HARS mode. We'll leave this in nav mode because clicking anything else is awful. It will realign the aircraft, which takes more minutes. Before you want to start the engines, you want to turn on your fuel pumps. Thank you. I hit the stability system here. Arm the seat. That's all good. Sweeping across. I hit my secondary horizon and center it up and down. You can left click and then scroll, and that'll cage it again. So it won't turn, it won't move, won't do anything. When it's uncaged, you roll it back across that point and then recenter it. Now it'll move essentially whatever this does, but if something happens to this one is independent and it'll still be doing its own thing. So now we're coming up on 3 minutes for the EO timer on our Mavericks, and boom, master arm safe. Hey, I still wanted to shoot that thing. Oh, well, there I turned my master arm on, and now I'm getting sensor input from the Mavericks, and I can slew that little cursor around, and it's going really slow. So I'm going to pick 1, and I'm going to set that there, and now it's slewing quite a bit faster. The plus sign indicates relative to the missile where the seeker head is looking. So oriented to the missile. So right now it's looking up and right from center. So the seeker heads are all looking up and right from center. What are we seeing over here? We're seeing, let's identify something here. We've got another A10 and a control tower. So it's looking that direction right there. So that's how you can see where your Mavericks are trying to look at relative to where you're pointing. So this plus symbol relative to the box is the relative position of the seeker head. The closer to center, the better when you go to fire, just in terms of the missile not bleeding a ton of energy trying to make a turn when it comes right off the rail. Basically, it'll get to the target area a little faster because it's not going to slow down or bleed some of its acceleration in that initial turn. And Kidnap mentioned that there's a good point there, that you can see the indication in the HUD of where that sensor is looking. Let's see if I can pop this puppy up here. And I'm using the cursor slew, which is a set of keyboard buttons just up, down, left, right, or it's on your HOTAS, it's that little nipple on the front, which should actually be that big dish-shaped button or switch there. I'm not getting an indication on the HUD right now. It may be because we're on the ground and the ground safe is on, but we're not going to worry about that. If this EO timer gets up over half an hour or so, it's going to come up with a warning. Basically, there's a finite amount of time that each of your EO timers on the missiles is usable for. And if that's exceeded in the simulator, you can reset it, but it takes 3 minutes to realign. So you would turn it off, and it powers off. And then you turn it back on. Now 3 minutes later, they'll be ready to go again. Your timer is set up. Okay, that's all those things. We were going to set the lase codes. Man, I'm getting off on a lot of tangents here, guys. Sorry for the chaotic organization. I probably should have come up with a curriculum and stuck to it, but winging it's fun too, I guess. All right, so on the dismiss page of your left MFCD, you're going to see GBU 12s. You have inventory and profile. So let's go to the profile page. Okay, well, this is what kind of weapons profile you're planning on using. And you can modify all of these with, let's see, active. Okay, that selects active. This allows you to view what the profile is and all of the different functions that go into it. So this is your fusing, and this is change settings. This is what mode you want to drop in, etc., etc. It's a bit of a different rabbit hole, but we'll get there. Back to the profile main page, back to the stats page, profile main page, stats page. See how you get back and forth from there. If you want to change a lase code, you have to do it through the inventory page. For emphasis, if you want to change a lase code for a munition, it has to be done on the inventory page. So you will click inventory. Then you will select the weapon you want to change the inventory or the lase code for. In this case, it's the GBU 12. Well, store detected 1 GBU 12 DB version, and that's on station 4. So it's saying this is what's here and this is what it thinks it is. But you can tell it whatever you want. But if you tell it the wrong thing, it's just going to shrug at you and say, I don't think you're right. I'm not going to do anything with this until you fix me. So trust it. If there's an error where you're getting a mismatch, you think you're putting a store on that you're not, it could be helpful if you're on the ground to hit the slash key and then the F8 key and then the F1 key. And there's another shortcut to get there, but I don't remember what that shortcut is. I just always access it through the intercom menu by hitting F8 after slash. So F1 brings up your stores, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you that's a GBU-38. That's an AGM-65D. That's your TGP. That's your missiles. That's your heaters. There's your EBO station. There's your flares. Here's your your flares and chaff count, and the amount of gun ammo, and the type of ammo. Combat mix is, I believe, 4 or 5 depleted uranium rounds with 1 high explosive round mixed in. HEI is just all 30mm grenades, basically. And that's what the mix has been used in Afghanistan more recently, just because they're more effective on soft targets than the depleted uranium rounds, because they have splash damage, where the DU rounds don't unless they hit something solid enough to get hot and fragment, and that's a whole different type of lecture. Target practice rounds are tracer, and I believe they're also incendiary. If you guys have seen the gun picture on my my waiting screen before, you'll see those blue rounds in there. Those are practice rounds. So they're live ammo, but they're not combat ammo. I mean, obviously a 30mm practice round is still going to do some work if it hits something, but it's not armor piercing. It's not really great for tanks. It wouldn't be great for splash damage on a group of people. So, if for whatever reason you planned on doing air-to-air fighting, target practice rounds would be good because you would have the tracers to help see where you're shooting. Otherwise, you're just guessing, which, let's face it, most of what we do is. I know, Weld, we're not supposed to guess. Don't fly with the heart. Use the brain. If you guys haven't seen it, Weld did a little thing on using the gun cross and range circle, or lead circle, to range targets in the 109, which applies to most of those World War II aircraft, but pretty good stuff. So anyway, you can confirm that on the ground. It should automatically detect what the store is, and that's Weld smiling there. Let's see here. So it's a GBU, so we're going to click the GBU tab. And it's a GBU 12, so we're going to click GBU 12. And now we have all the different information here. I've had very poor luck dealing with nose and tail fusing in this. Every time I try and change a setting, I screw it up. I need to spend a lot more time learning that stuff before I try and mess with it anymore. Basically, the only thing that I screw with when I come in here is the lase code. If they have modeled it, then changing the nose and tail fusing or selecting nose versus tail fusing is a way you can set your bomb from point, which means as soon as the bomb touches the ground, it explodes, to delay, which adds a 0.05 second delay to the bomb, which when it's falling from 12,000 feet is quite a bit of feet distance. So a 0.05 second delay means that it's going to penetrate, then detonate. Yeah, like I said, I've not had good luck trying to figure that out. I think that if I could figure it out, I would probably have a much better effect with smaller bombs on bigger bunkers than I have been, because right now I'm just dropping precision bombs on the exterior of bunkers and they're smiling at me. Very, very painful. Anyway, this laser code, I set myself as 1345 in the flight. So in the scratch pad, I hit it wrong. I'm clearing. I just tapped that a bunch of times to make sure. 1, 3, 4, 5. This is a good way to help deconflict with your flight while you're flying. If you're all using your own lase code, then it relates to your flight information on the JTARS or EPLARS info, so your net information. It's really easy to know who's lasing what, and if someone else, their TGP fails, they take a bullet, anything happens, but they still have stores and they can still drop those stores, thank you, then you can lase for them. Again, that's a whole different rabbit hole. That could be its own lesson in itself, but yeah, if you already know what his lase code should be, then it's really easy to do that. So I was saying before the net info be 01, 02, 03, 04 in a flight. If you're going to use lasers, a better option is to do 11, 12, 13, 14, because then 11 is the lowest you can set for a lase code. So you could have 1145, 1245, 1345, and 1445. And, you know, hey, 3's TGP down, need lase. Got it. You come over to your TGP and you tell it to lase 1345, and now suddenly you're lasing for him. His bomb, you know, he'll pick the target and drop it. Send it.
My lase code isn't changing. I keep getting a Kiku error.
Okay, is your IFFCC in on or test mode?
On.
Okay, then on your upfront controller, just spam the clear button a whole bunch.
Primes, what number do you have?
1369.
Okay, because I tried before 66 and it looks like it's too high.
Okay, so that is too high. I'm getting an error as well. I actually don't know how high that goes in terms of range, so you've just discovered a limitation, and that's a good thing to share. Thank you.
So yeah, like 1313 worked for me.
Okay. I know that there's a range, and it starts at 1,000. I don't know what the full range is. It might be like 1.4. No, I don't want to say. I'll just try and find out and get back to you some other time. But obviously, there's plenty of lase codes to choose from. It just is helpful when you have your flight configured in a way that you can stack it all that way. So, it's a good thing he pointed that out. I would have omitted some stuff there that could have gotten you guys really frustrated. And frustrated people don't fly sim for very long. Not unless they have some help. It's truth. And that's why there's not too many of you flying sim. But hopefully we're working on that right now. Courtesy of the Wet Bandits and all these other good friends that I've been making over here. So. Okay, so I've changed my lase code to my flight information, which for this purpose is going to be 1345. I now can load or load symmetry. So you saw before that the store's pylons were all configured in an inverted U shape around the outside. So if I choose load, it's going to load that store on one pylon only, the way I have it configured. If I choose load symmetry, it's going to copy all of this information to station 4 and its reciprocal on the other side? Well, because I only have one GBU 12, I just want to hit load. If I had a lot of stores and they were all the same on both sides of the aircraft, then I would hit load symmetry to save time. So now I'm hitting load. And there we go. GBU 12 on pulse rate frequency, PRF code or lase code, same thing. So my pulse rate frequency, PRF code, is 1345. And that is the frequency that that bomb is now capable of targeting. It cannot target any other frequencies. So, but if I come to my TGP and I select air-to-ground mode from standby, see we got this dirty latitude longitude. I'm going to nope right out of that by hitting Control after I'm in air-to-air or air-to-ground mode, which actually air-to-air is irrelevant because it does not care what the ground coordinates are. Air-to-ground mode, Control, right side, MGRS. I leave this in meters. MGRS, like I said before, each one of those numbers translates to a meter. Leaving this in metric means that this little number right here is in meters as well. This little number right here, let me move it. See how slow this feels like it's turning, even though I've cranked it up in that other display? All right, so what this is telling me is, oh, this is actually a really good way to do it. Thank you for the follow there. Well, all right, we'll just go without. Essentially, the mill relation form. Nope, never mind. Not going to mess with that. Whole different thing. What we need to know here is this number is an estimate of how far it is from the inside of this line to the outside. It's only one half of the crosshair, and it's only the length of the line itself. It's not from the center of the crosshair. It's the length of the line. And that's a good way to estimate distances when they're farther away. If I zoom this puppy out, okay, well now suddenly at 64 miles away, this line represents 605 meters. And if I zoom it all the way in, you can now the China hat, I push it quickly. I push it quickly forward, and it zooms all the way in. This little white box vanishes. If I push it quickly, what is in this field is now going to become the entire screen. So it's a rapid zoom function. Clicking the China hat aft, back quickly, aft back. China hat aft short is the key command, and that will revert whichever sensor you have selected, Maverick or TGP, targeting pod, back to center default position. So it's like bore sighting the weapons or the sensors again. If you ever get a what's the word I'm looking for? If you ever get an indication on here that says roll, and I'll try and simulate it later. If you ever get one that says roll, and your TGP's acting funny and it's not tracking stuff like it should be, and when you turn the jet, it moves, just hit China hat aft short. If you have not already set a point before that, then you're going to have the trouble of trying to find whatever you're looking at again. So anytime I find something of value with the TGP, I drop a mark point, just in case something like that happens. Oh, 1 a.m. Take care, Quark. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, this is a way to increase your pull-out altitude for your collision avoidance, unless I am very mistaken. If I am, please feel free to call me on it. And here are your lase code and laser spot search codes. So LSS means that if you enter LSS mode, it's going to be looking for lasers with whatever frequency you have set. And that's one good way if you have no idea what you're looking for. All right, good looking out, Oz. Good find. Oz says lase codes have to be between 1111 and 1788. Also, no 9s in the lase codes allowed. Anyway, so I'm now in LSS mode, and this little thing's wiggling around. It's trying to look generally wherever this thing was pointed, which it's doing some fucky stuff right now. It doesn't like being on the ground in that mode. It's trying to look in front of me to figure out if there's a laser that it can find with that code. It's just sweeping back and forth. And if it sees one, it locks to it and stays. And that little thing on the front of the A-10, I hate when it does that. This little thing on the front of the A-10 here, called the pave penny, used to fulfill that function before the TGP existed. You'll notice on a lot of A-10s now, this entire side piece has been taken off, and they're just going away because it's an irrelevant piece of technology with the advent of the TGP. You don't have to use that anymore. I think they still have... Yeah, I think this stuff down here was part of what dealt with that, and there's no reason to deal with it anymore, so... Okay, what do we got? What do we got? Air to ground mode, control. So I'm going to configure this to drop my bombs. 1, 3, 4, 5. And now I set that as my lase code. I'm going to set my laser spot search code. Well, because I have not coordinated with anybody else here, it's not easy to know what's going to happen. A lot of you guys are showing up. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll skip setting that. If I need to find it out later, then someone can drop it in chat if they need to buddy lays later. But let's not bother with that today, to be honest, because that's its own thing. Thank you, I think. I'm sure it was a compliment. It just caught me off guard there. Okay, I think that's enough to get us off the ground here. We've done the stats page. Now my JTARS is on, which means my EPLARS has passed its test. Everything's full green. I can reconfirm. Oh, that's why that was going slow. I didn't set that this time. 0. Wait for it. 1. Slew speed to 0.1. Now I come back over here at air to ground mode. Oh my gosh, it's so much better. It goes so much faster now. So, your TGP will have errors being able to roll because this little thing is like a steering wheel. It can only go around so many times before it runs out of travel. I can only speculate on why that is, and so I won't bother you with that, but you can't just put the TGP on something on the right and then spin the jet like this and have the TGP point at it all the time. It can do it while you roll back and forth, but as soon as you roll too many times, it exceeds its capabilities and then it just starts going with it. Man, Oz, you've studied the shit out of this, and that's fucking awesome, man. Props on the book knowledge, brother. Okay. Oh, Countermeasures is good. Ralphie Dude, I don't know if most of you might be familiar, might not. Ralphie Dude has a YouTube channel, and he has a Intro to Countermeasures section on there. So I'm not going to cover anything. I'm just going to say I set standby. I turn my powers on after my aircraft is armed, because if you don't, and you don't have a jammer before, this is going to say jammer off, or no jammer. What is it going to say? It's going to say off. So even if you turn this on, if you turn it on before, then that's what you got. And then I operate only in manual mode. Semi mode is a decent place to start, but it's going to cost you a lot of countermeasures that you might not always need. So learning how to react to different threats is, again, an entire another rabbit hole to go down. We're not going to bother with that today. Just basically what you need to know, and here's your CMS button on the stick. Bam. Left and right, you'll see in the background there, changes the program. Pew, pew, pew. Forward and back activates and deactivates the program. So Alpha's program might be to pop one chaff every so many seconds and so many flares every so many seconds for so long. You know, it has a number, iterations, and duration, and time, or counts, or whatever the case may be, interval. You can manually set these programs. We're not going to cover that right now. If you're fighting simple infrared guided missiles like shoulder fired missiles or Strelas, let's see here. These guys are radar missiles, and it's helpful to find one of these things and print it out. There was probably an updated one because I know they've made some tweaks, but this is an old one that I was using just to help me learn back in the day what each system looked like. Yeah, these are all radar indications, and we go through all of those and wind up at infrared guided. Bam, Strela SA-13. You see one of these puppies? Then it is absolutely, definitely time to be running the Charlie program, provided that that's the best system in the area. If there's radar missiles, then you need to be set to a blend or whatever. But Charlie is your key program for missile avoidance when you hear the missile beep go off and nobody calls rifle. Calling rifle is a courtesy. It's part of brevity. There's a link below this to a multi-service tactics, techniques, and procedures book on using brevity. It's a big read. All of this stuff is a big read. If you want to get good, you just have to read and then practice. Yeah. Anyway, so Charlie is your infrared missiles defense, and it's going to pop a crap ton of flares in a very short amount of time. And basically, you're just giving off enough heat elsewhere that infrared missiles get confused and go that way. Chaff is like little scraps of aluminum foil that pop out. Watching my stream before, you might have seen under the corner of the wings, there's a few little boxes. And those are the countermeasures dispensers. And a lot of the times they'll have chaff and or flares in whatever buckets are needed. So chaff is like tinfoil, and because it's swirling through the air like rotor blades, it gives off a really big radar signature and helps throw off radar-guided missiles. You know, they had this one concise, okay, here's a jet, and I can see it reflecting radar energy back at me from my seeker head or from the other, you know, the aircraft that launched me's radar is bouncing back at it. Well, putting the chaff out between you and the missile, that's a critical part. It really needs to be between you and the threat, because it's like putting a aluminum smokescreen behind you of these swirling particles that the radar is looking at like, what's going on? I can't see anything anymore. IS Gatka is a guy that I fly with. He's done a missile mod for this game. He's pretty fluent in most of the coding on as far as what the missiles are doing logically in the game, as how they're modeled versus real life. His understanding is that it's a dice roll. I don't know if it accounts in the game for putting the chaff between you or if it's just within view, but I seem to personally have better luck when the chaff is between me and the threat. So I put the missile behind me, or at least on the beam, as it's called, or the 3-9 line. So you've got 12 o'clock, 3-9, and 6 o'clock. So you put the missile on the beam and go to turn, and that causes the missile to turn as hard as it can. And now we're getting off on another tangent for missile avoidance, which is another rabbit hole. But yeah, we're going to put this puppy back in standby, and I'm going to reset this thing again because I've been talking for 25 minutes. Holy smurf, guys. I can't believe you're all still watching me right now. The CDU. I didn't mention this before. Pushing the CDU OSB on your MFD, which you can set to either using the hold function that I described earlier, will mirror the information on here from down here. So the combination of this here on the MFD and this on the upfront controller will give you most functions from here. So there's no reason to be like, oh yeah, I'm flying along and I'm just going to put some stuff in. Hold on, guys. Let me just bury my face in the cockpit over here and just click around on these little hooty buttons. Herderp, herb derp. Oh, hey, that's a mountain. Boom, and then you're dead. Chaff is made of mylar. Good looking out. Very thin metallic strips. And they spin and swirl in the vortices of the aircraft. And the combination of the radar cross-section and motion throws off seeker heads. Somebody left. That's too bad. Okay. That's pretty good for those systems. One more. I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to go to the TAD because I didn't save this information. Actually, let's do that. I've got my knee board right here. And if you're flying the A-10, it's a good idea to have a pen and paper handy. I just happen to have an e-board because I do fly, and it's handy because I keep the stick between my legs and I don't have a desk here. I'm using my TV and some cardboard boxes. But thanks, Eco. Take care. Appreciate you hanging out and stopping by, and I will catch you soon. Let's see. So I did not set a waypoint on these guys, but I want to find them. So let's say I'm playing the JTAC right now, and I'm going to call up a 10-digit grid. We're going to do it all informal. We're just going to say the center of this cluster is where the mouse is, and that's going to be 38 Tango, Mike Mike, 86643 23631. This is just kind of a radio etiquette thing. When you go to send a 10-digit grid like that,
User
generally,
disconnected from your channel.
if you're operating in the same area, you can omit the first three. You don't need to worry if it's 37 Tango or 38 Tango or anything else. If you aren't in the same area or if you're far apart, it's best to send all 15 digits of the 10-digit grid. I realize that sounds asinine, but bear with me. So if I were sending this grid to someone, I would say the grid is 38 Tango, Mike Mike. And then I pause. That gives them a second to process that chunk of 5 digits while they write. And then I continue. 86643 23631. Usually a couple seconds pause between each, or even just a long hesitation between each, is enough for a person's brain to chunk those numbers up into one thing to scribble down. Suddenly it's like a word of letters instead of 5 individual digits or 10 digits. Just trying to remember a 10 digit off the top of your head takes a lot of practice. You can do it. I was very good at it at one point. I'm not very good at it anymore. So be courteous to your wingmen. Break that up into chunks when you send it. It can be good to send the altitude, but it's not critical because there's an F10 map and people should have an idea where they're at. So I'm not going to worry about the altitude. Okay, so the JTAC just told me it's 38 Tango Mike Mike, 86643 23631. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click the waypoint button. And then I'm going to click the waypoint tab. And then I'm going to click this lower selector button on the right side because I like UTM, because lat long gets confusing very quickly. Obviously you could get good at it, but if you're dealing with someone on the ground or trying to quickly organize general positions, UTM is better. It is the metric of navigation. All right, so 38 Tango is there. We don't need to worry about that. But you do want to verify that that's the correct identifier first. If you do not verify that it's the correct identifier or someone does not send it, Line and I experienced this during Blue Flag. He gave me a set of data, and I had, for example, 38 Tango. Well, he was in 37 Tango just because of where we were having to fly from and to run the Blue Flag ops. And I wound up flying, obviously, like 100 kilometers from where, or I was headed 100 kilometers from where he was at. You know, I was flying the wrong direction. Partway there, he's like, wow, dude, what are you doing? What grid are you in? So I sent him my current grid. I checked the F10 map because I'm able to cheat like that, and gave him that. You can always find your own position on the TAD just by bringing the cursor over to yourself. Bring the cursor back to you, and it'll display on the bottom there. 38 Tango Mike Mike, Niner 6 Niner 76, 131 Niner 5. So anyway, back to our regularly scheduled learning BS. If you want to input the next line, which actually, before I do anything else, I am going to do this. I'm going to call this TRPS for troops. And then I'm going to set that as the next waypoint. So you put troops, and then you click the copy function, which opens up a new one. It's not always necessary, but it's easier for me to waste one of my available waypoints than it is to enter the information wrong and then punch myself in the face, just because that winds up hurting after a while. So now you're on a fresh one. You're still in 3/8 Tango. Don't worry about the WG84. That is just referencing the age of the map data, basically. So 84 is when the most current stuff was. That's something entirely different. Mike 86643. So I send Mike 86643. And now I don't add a space, but then I include the next 5 digits, 23631. 23631. So now I should have a 12-digit string for what is known as a 10-digit grid. To expand on that, when someone says 10-digit grid, they're just referring to the accuracy. If I asked for a 6-digit grid, I would only want something within 100 meters. If I'm asking for a 4-digit grid, I only want something within a square kilometer. So you're sending the first 2 of each. So 10 digits is obviously you want 1 meter by 1 meter resolution, and that's what you need for precision weapons. If you're not sending a precision weapon and you're just trying to get to a general area, or you want to know where to look roughly, you could just send an abbreviated grid by sending a 6-digit. I could say in our vicinity grid 866236 if we're all operating in the same area. I can just say that quickly, and they can know, okay, 83600 23600, and you've got to put those zeros on if you're entering in the scratch pad. Actually, let's do that way. So this is what the actual grid to that specific location would be. But if I just want to get close, I can do back. Okay, so 866 is the information he gave, and I've got to add 00 so the computer knows what's going on, so that I have 5 numerical digits there. Next, I've got 23600, and now I've got a full 12-digit piece of information, and I can insert it here. Bam. 1763 is the elevation. The computer has stored map information for terrain, for elevation of the terrain at a specific location, as well as the actual graphical maps saved in there. It's called DTET data, digital terrain elevation data. Anyway, so when you put that in, as long as the computer has that information, it'll spit out an elevation. Word to the wise, do not input these things until your EG has aligned. So don't put things in the scratch pad while you're waiting on the ground. Send it.
I do believe that you could just put in the 866236 and get to that same grid. It has been my experience.
I'm going to try it out real quick because I fucked it up before and it didn't work out well.
Okay.
Okay.
We use that.
You speak the truth, sir, so thank you.
Yeah, we use that for that Operation Bacteria that I'm working on.
Okay. Fair enough. That's awesome, man. I'm glad you called me on that. Thank you. So he did call me on that. The computer, I didn't have good luck with this before. It could be possible I was screwing it up before, but if you get a 6-digit grid, all you have to do is put in the 2-letter identifier and the 6 digits, and it'll add the zeros for you. So, well job, ED, for either correcting the model, because I haven't tried to do that in a long time, or something else. Awesome. And guys, don't hesitate to call me on this. I might look a little dejected because I'm sad that I have fucked up telling you the right thing, but I would much rather know and get you guys the right info than, you know, have my pride out there just blinding me to all the right answers. I want to keep learning too. There's so much here that it would take a long time to learn it all correctly without actually being an A10 pilot. Okay, that is all we're going to cover for the CDU. There's a series of different functions in here. These are all sorts of different stuff. There are possibly some functions that might help, but I have never had a situation to use them. Between the TGP and the waypoint entry function of the CDU, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Waypoint page, you can enter waypoints, steer points, anchor points. I'm sure there are YouTube videos out there that can help you explain what the differences are and how they stack up. but waypoints is the way that I go. If I can learn more about it, then maybe a future Learning Sim Sunday event might go a little more in depth on the CDU specifically. We'll break that up into a smaller chunk, I think, because I can't believe how long we've been streaming already. I've gone over the 2 hours, so um, hopefully you feel like bearing with me. Is it an issue I've gone over the standard 2-hour chunk for Learning Sim?
I wouldn't suspect so.
Okay. Alrighty.
This isn't a 2-hour game.
No, it is not. It's not a 2-hour learning process for sure, but it's a start. Okay, it's just another quick orientation for the cockpit here. This stuff has to deal with what's going on in the cockpit. This is a washer function, or you can... my understanding is that this is going to bleed air off the engines over the front windscreen to help clear rain remove, dear, rain fart. Canopy defog has no modeling in the game, but you can set it to blow defog air up around the base of the canopy and help with that. Windshield defog de-ice, unless I'm very mistaken, that has to do with electrically charging the windows so that they will heat up, kind of like your defroster on the back window of your car. Pitot heat is a very important thing if you're ever flying at higher elevations or wintertime. You could be flying along and suddenly get a master caution or realize that your airspeed shows 0 on this gauge. Obviously, flying along, it's not 0. Well, what's probably happened is the front of your pitot tube, the little tiny hole out there, has gotten clogged over with ice or something, probably ice. You turn the heat on and it melts that ice off, and you just leave it on anytime you're in adverse cold conditions. Flying through clouds at high elevation also can cause that to ice over. And they did model that. You don't see any indication of it except that your gauge stops working. This is cabin control, no modeling there. These are lights. Anti-collision or your strobe lights. One thing to make sure is that this little pinky switch back here, make sure that puppy is not centered. When that switch is centered, it's a combat off, so it just blanks all of your lights. So that if you get into combat quickly, you can just blank all the lights real fast, and you don't have to reach around and switch a bunch of different levers. Make sure that I set it aft, personally. Forward and aft have 2 different functions. Aft is the brighter, as I understand it, and also permits anti-collision lights, formation lights, and position lights. Position lights are the red, green, white ones. Anti-collision of the strobes. Nose illume. There's little light bulbs out under this pylon and this pylon that shine forward onto the nose, as you can see there. You can see by the Sidewinder and by the Illume, or the electronic warfare pod. Not warfare, the jamming pod. Jesus, I'll spit out the right word eventually. These next 5 deal with interior lighting. These are your engine instruments, your auxiliary instruments, your console backlighting, your flight instrument backlighting. So I can turn that up and down. If you click a rotary and hold it, when you look away, if you drag the mouse, it's still turning that rotary, which is really handy in this situation, because I can turn this one, and then I can look away and see, okay, how is this going to affect my visibility at night? I just want a little bit of light, so I can just keep easing it up. So it's daytime, we don't really need any of these on. Floodlights, for whatever reason, are kind of broken right now. Just a graphical glitch. In the full version of DCS that's not beta, the whole canopy illuminates. Somebody's hot micing a little bit.
Sorry, man.
No, you're good. I just wanted to let you know. Okay, over here we have the steer point, mark point, flight plan function. So mission includes all of your waypoints for the mission, and it includes any mark points, or hey, I created one that said troops, and there's troops. Let's see where troops is. Let's see. Oh, well, it looks like there might be a new waypoint here now, and it's kind of right next to a river, and it's like 8 miles from me. So let's see how well we did on this. This is your measurement tool. You can click that and then right click. I click down where I'm at and come up here. That's about 8 miles to the north. Well, west-northwest. Awesome. This is TACAN. You can use it to find airfields, and you can use it to find, thank you, aircraft. You can use it to find other aircraft in the sky. That's a whole nother ball game. But if you want to find a tanker, the tankers are 01 X-ray and 11 X-ray in here. I say again, 01 X-ray and 11 X-ray. I don't remember which is which, but there are some air tankers above here. So, ILS is for your instrument landing system. I have never screwed with the panel in the back, and I'm not even going to bother telling you what it's about. On the left side, there's a whole bunch of dials and buttons. All of these three deal with radios here. 1, 2, and 3. This is a fueling panel. You have your boost pumps. That's the in-tank fuel pumps that supply the engine fuel pump. This has to do with refueling. And how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, thanks. One other thing that can be helpful, sir. One other thing that can be really helpful here is the ground safe. A lot of fuckery can be happening. Yes, sir.
What are you flying?
We're flying DCS A10C today.
Ah, DCS?
Yes, sir.
Then never mind. Right.
Okay, so
User
take care.
left your channel.
If you need to run the gun on the ground for some reason, I've jokingly used the term reverse thrust before, because there's no way to back up in here. But you can if you cheat and use the A10's main cannon. Not really advisable. If there's a threat on the ground, or there's several different times or reasons you might want to use it, but most of the time you're probably screwing around if you do. But anyway, that's where the switch is, and that's the last one in the back. Those deal with volumes. That again is the IFF or transponder code panel. It's kind of all integrated. All of this stuff has to deal with emergencies, and I have never had time to screw with it. Because anytime something goes wrong, I have 2 seconds until I'm dead, or it takes all of my concentration to keep it in the air. Hey, Texaco's checking in. Yeah, if I can save the jet, then it's still flyable enough that I'm not worried about it, and I just struggle home. You know, you've got to cross control and fight the controls the whole way, but eventually it all does work out or not. So there are emergency procedures that involve using this stuff. You can see here there's a disengage function. There's explosive bolts built in to the connectors between the left side and the right side controls, and then also the aft controls. And so if one of them gets hit and becomes jammed, you can unstick the other one and get back some control authority, rather than just having both of them stuck in one position. There's also a manual reversion control mode that basically means you're using the stick to control only the trim tabs, which are little tabs on the back of the control surface. You can see the rod that connects it right there. They're also sometimes referred to as servo or anti-servo tabs on other aircraft, depending on their intended function. Again, that's a whole other rabbit hole. If you want to read about that stuff, you can actually go to FAA.gov and look for the Aeronautical Information Manual. And that's going to have a whole bunch of good information on just general flight stuff. All right, I'm going to turn on my analog brakes. I'm going to start my left engine. I bring it up over the hump. There we go. You'll notice your temp spikes on your APU. You'll notice the engine percentage RPM comes up. And then when it gets to about 20, it introduces fuel in your temp spikes. And as it continues to climb about 30% core speed, your oil pressure is going to come up. You'll also notice that the primary, or the fan speed is coming up. On these engines, the fan and the core of the jet engine are not directly connected. The shaft for this fan rotates inside the shaft for the engine core. And basically there's a separate turbine in the exhaust section that is, well, there's actually a couple turbines, and all the exhaust gas coming out of the jet engine is blowing over these turbine wheels, and then all of that energy is being carried through the shaft back to this big fan on the front of the engine. So there's like one big fan and then little fans for the jet engine inside. And so they're all spinning, but they're free to spin at separate speeds. They're going the same way, but separate speeds. Obviously, I don't have swirly wrists. So when you increase power to the core, or when you add power, you should see your temps come up. Let's see here. Do I have... I think left first has brakes. I'm going to verify that real quick. I'm increasing my left throttle here. Okay, it's holding. I've got brake. If you do not have hydraulic pressure to your left hydraulic system, your ground brakes will not work, and you will have to use the emergency brakes. It charges the system, I believe, with nitrogen in lieu of hydraulic pressure, and gives you emergency stopping power. I've increased the thrust of this engine now, so the internal core speed has come up, and so has the fan speed. You'll notice there's a jump in the core speed, and then the fan slowly catches up to a relative holding point. The fan generally spools down pretty quick, and then the core kind of catches up, but usually the core leads on increases. So the left engine's fully started, and I know that because the engine was just responding properly, but also because the APU is at 100% and the temperatures are back down around 400. I move the right engine to throttle start position, or to start position. I move the right throttle to start position. English is hard to do. Okay, it's introduced fuel. The core speed's coming up. The oil pressure is out of the red line now. You'll notice that the APU is working really hard there. It's burning a lot of gas to try and make those the bleed air. So extra air that's being pulled into the APU that's not being used to burn is now being sent to the engine to run the starter on the engine. And I'm really glad that Oz has been watching and called me on that stuff earlier, because I had it in my head for whatever reason that the exhaust was being directed from the APU to the engines, and that was incorrect. It was the bleed air is being directed to another tiny little turbocharger looking thing, and that is set to run a gear, and that gear and shaft and all that stuff is what's running into the engines and turns them. So the air from the APU is not going through the engine, it's going to the starter on the engine. Oz, thank you for calling me out on my bullshit. Okay, so these engines are both started. These generator lights should be this one and this one. I'll turn one off here. When those things are both off, that means that both those generators are working. This thing is on because I'm getting power from more than one source now. I've got the APU and the engine generators all generating power, which I don't need. So I can turn off the APU generator, and now the light goes away. I can also turn the APU off. And then it spools down. That thing runs down and it cools off, and this thing runs down and it cools off, and eventually it'll all be happy. And I've still got my ground collision avoidance system, excuse me, and the enhanced attitude control. Over here, these two little guys right here. Enhanced attitude control, pretty self-explanatory. The radar altimeter we discussed earlier, you flip that switch into norm. And now suddenly the radio altimeter in the bottom of the jet can find the ground and get a signal and bounce it back, and it knows how far it is from the ground based on that. Now it's not just going off of stored data and barometric pressure, which is the pressure that the altimeter is using. It is getting information from a direct electronic measurement. And enhanced attitude control. If you've ever flipped this switch and enhanced attitude control has still been displayed like it is right now, you're not in EG mode. So your nav, if you want to get back to your alignment page, you click Nav tab, or over here you hit Function, 2, because nav is the one displayed under it. And that brings you to this page. And then you go to align, and that brings you back to that initial screen that displayed after the bit test. And it shows you your initial position in UTM or lat long, which you can switch. And we're in nav mode. And so now, once we're in nav mode, we're safe to switch from HARS to EG. And EG means that it's using the amalgam of all the different data to tell you where you're at and where you're headed. And once you've done that, the HUD gets this little airplane symbol here, a little circle with lines. That's called the total velocity vector. What that is a calculation of where the jet is going to go at any given moment, based on crosswinds and winds and angle of attack and speed, and there's a ton of factors that go into it, but basically it's just a projection of where you're headed at any given second. It's not necessarily a projection of where you're going, going, but a projection of where you're headed. And the difference is that if you keep it on the same point, you're always going to be headed to it, and you're going to go there. But if you turn, then you're obviously not going to wind up there. Okay, so we have the engine started. Everything on your warning annunciator board is out. I refer to it as the chocolate bar for the obvious reason that it looks like a Hershey's bar. That is a very slang term. Engines are at idle. Everything's happy. Everything's in the green. We're good to roll. Except if we want to steer on the ground, the A-10 doesn't use differential braking. You'll notice here the nose wheel is actually offset the center line of the jet. You can see it right there. It's off to the right side of the jet, left from this view. And that's to make room for this gun. That gun, including the ammo stuff, winds up kind of somewhere underneath that American star on the side there. Yeah, the whole system is a very, very big gun system. Let's see, what else do we need? I'm going to, if I use my coolie hat and flip it up once short, that's this little guy right here, up once short, that selects the HUD as my sensor of interest, and pushing up or down on the DMS key. Oh, hey, now this thing's alive and it's doing stuff.